it's a half-day fishing excursion with. Okay, I guess I'm being recorded. Let me get rid of it so you can. Half-day fishing excursion with Captain Stan Allen. What's going on here? Excuse me a second. Okay. So we have a half-day fishing excursion with Captain Stan Allen, and there'll be one winner, and that person who wins it will be able to take with him another guest. The agenda for this evening is, as you see up here, we'll start off as usual with our fishing stories and talk a little bit about lagoon guides. Then this week, this past Tuesday, I guess it was, Monday or Tuesday, we had a banquet, the state banquet, Georgia State Banquet. And the president of that, Tom Rood, is going to talk to us a little bit about that. And coming up in the end of the month is the Kids Fishing Derby. So he's going to be giving us a brief synopsis of what's going to happen there, and be ready to be asked to volunteer. We can use some help. And then we'll ask Dave to come on up and talk a little bit about fundraising and introduce our guest speaker, Mike Neal. And I'm sure that's the reason why he came here. He's an outstanding captain, gives a heck of a presentation when you're with him. And we remember a few years ago, some of us all went to Ossabaw Island. It was a magnificent trip. So looking forward to whatever he has to tell us. And then Dave will wrap up the meeting for us. So fishing stories. This is usually the part where some of you willing to share your experiences with us on the lagoons or on the inshore fishing or offshore fishing. Anybody out there? Don't be bashful. You want to talk about a hole-in-one? All right. Well, we have on Facebook. I don't know if all of you have. Many of you are familiar with Facebook, but there's this the landings release catch and release section now. It's a group, one of the groups, and people are posting. People out here living here on the island, taking pictures of the fish that they're catching and posting. Sorry, Mr. Mark McGarity isn't here, or Stu, who caught this flounder, but Walker is one of the sons of Pat Brooks, who's very active in our organization, part of the board, and I think Walker is Tillman here yet? He's not here, so Walker is probably the best fisherman on the island at the moment, but and you can see the size of the fish that he catch. And here's Tillman. Tillman is a young man that came to work with us, actually. My trainer was out walking with her granddaughter and saw this young man catch a fish. This is about 1.5 years ago. Catch a fish, and it was humongous. And he was so excited. And when I was working out with her, she said, "I got to show you this picture of this young man who caught this fish." And so I asked her to ask him if I can show the picture. And since that day, he's become a member of our organization, and he actually goes out with young children and helps them catch fish. And he comes to the Kids Fishing Derby all the time and lends his expertise. And this is a recent catch. And he said he was going to be here to talk about it. Well, I talk about it. He said that these fish were between 20 and 30 pounds. And he didn't tell me, he didn't have a tape measure to see how long they were, but he can tell that they were 20 or 30 pounds. In any event, that's one heck of a catch. And if you want to know where you can find fish like that, you got to look. How many of you are familiar with our fishing lagoon guide? Are you, Pauline, you know about fishing lagoon guides? She does. Anyway, we have them available in the back of the room. Hal Evans is there. And if you're not ready for one today, he has, but it'll tell you all the lagoons that we have, 151 lagoons, whether they're freshwater or white or saltwater or brackish water, and may even give you a couple of tips as to how to catch. And there's even a section in there for inshore fishing. It's not totally conclusive, but it's very informative. And so I encourage you all to, if you don't have one, it makes an excellent gift for somebody who likes to fish on the island. And at this point in time, I'd like to introduce Tom Rude.
Okay, thank you, Vic. How many went to the banquet last Tuesday? Hands? Okay, great. We had our annual banquet and auction last Tuesday out at the Palmetto Club. We had 220 people come, so it was very well attended. Probably one of our better attendance, even pre-pandemic. Probably one of our best ever. So lots of people came. We had the military there. We had 10 Rangers come from Hunter Air Base. They're significant others. Guests of an anonymous donor for the evening. They had a great evening. They were given some what we call Ranger bucks to spend on items that were at auction, etc. And they just had an outstanding time. As a matter of fact, for those that were there, our big raffle item for the evening was a fishing trip with Shimano up in Charleston. And one of the Rangers won that item. So it was quite exciting. And then he sat down and we started to pull the raffle tickets out of our drop buckets. We had 10 drop buckets with items for those, and raffle tickets were put in each bucket by people who bought raffle tickets. Well, this same gentleman won 4 of the 10 raffles. So got to be a little bit embarrassing for after a while, but he did very well. We had a little over 50 silent auction items, and we had 16 live auction items that went up for bid, and all of them created a lot of excitement for the evening. The food was excellent. For those of you who were there, you can attest to that. And we just had a great evening. And probably the best thing of all, for those of you that have been to these kinds of things in the past, we didn't have any line for checkout at the end. Everybody was given their winning prizes, their winning auction items before the evening ended. So no checkout, worked out great. We did very well financially for the state. So I think it really is and really was one of our better events that we've had, and certainly since we didn't have one in 2021 because of COVID, it was a great way to get back into the swing of having a banquet. So thanks to all of you that came. Those of you that didn't come, think about it next year, because we'll be back in probably the springtime with our annual banquet again. All right, let's see if I can advance this. Okay, coming up, the last weekend on Saturday, 28th, will be our kids fishing derby out at the kids fishing lagoon. How many have been to the kids fishing derby? Hands. Bringing kids to the derby, great. Great event. We have about generally between 120 and 100 that come. They all get a giveaway prize when they come in. We give them fishing poles and bait if they don't have it. We spread them around the lagoon. At 9 o'clock in the morning, we blow a whistle and they start fishing. And there's a prize for the first fish caught. Generally, that's within the first 10 seconds. And we always have fights about that because there's more than one that says they caught the first fish. So we have this lagoon set up right now with bluegill that are teeming in there. And if you ever want to try something, you can go over there any time of the day. We have a little bubble gum machine there that has fish pellets in it. You can get your handful of that, throw it out there and watch what happens. I think the fish food feeders, there's 5 or 6 of them around the lagoon, go off at 5 of them, 12:30. They go off at 12:30. And if you want to see the water boil, watch the fish come up and eat that fish food. So they're in there, a ton of them are in there. Last year, we caught 600 fish in a little over an hour. And some of the kids, believe it or not, we had 2 or 3 kids that caught more than 30 fish. So think about that. In an hour and 15 minutes, catching 30 fish, you got to be moving pretty good. So it's a really great time. And kids from 3 to 15 come. And 40 to 50% of the kids, first time fishing. So just to watch those kids catch those fish. And we have referees that go around and help out. And we have kids fishing buddies that go help. Anybody that hasn't caught a fish, they make sure they catch one. So it's just a great event. It's starts at 9 o'clock, fishing's over at 10:15. And then we have door prizes for the kids. And then we have fishing prizes. And what you're seeing here are the kids that won fishing prizes. And we have prizes in kids. We have classes, let's see, 3 to 5 and 6 to 8 and so forth. And the kids that catch the most fish in those age categories and kids that catch the biggest fish in those categories get a fishing rod and a tackle box. So it's a great event. If you ever want to see a pandemonium for about an hour, you come and watch this. We need volunteers. You can go to our website, ccaskidaway.org, and we have got a registration process for registering for volunteer activities. We have about 6 different categories of volunteers that we need. And we just have a great time, and hopefully you can come and see it sometime because it's really special. All right. Okay.
Stand on the tape. There's a lot to remember, Tom. Okay, so I'm taking Frank Wood's place right now. He's in charge of our fundraising. Once a year, we ask for money, and the money we ask for stays on the island 100%. It's for kids fishing events. It's for stocking the lagoons. We have fish stocking coming up the 12th, which is Thursday of this week, and we'll be putting about 20 to 30,000 bait fish into the freshwater lagoons. We do that every year, and it's a big investment because golf is huge down here, but fishing is huge down here as well. And we like trophy bass, and we practice catch and release. So we have right now we're at about 15.5. We have commitments. We're comfortably over $20,000 committed, but we've got a stretch to get up to 25. So, if you've received correspondence from us, as you surely have, please give us your consideration. Once again, the money here stays on the island. Fundraising campaign. So direct to Frank Wood, who had to go home. And you can pay by PayPal, credit card, check, or whatever. Give me a call, I'll pick it up. Okay. If you missed a meeting, we do have them recorded. And how do I access those? On our website? Okay. Okay. So we have 10 seminars a year, 1 a month. We don't have seminars in July or August. We try to have varied topics. In December, we'll always bring a chef on to discuss about how to prepare seafood, and we'll have samples here. And tonight, we have a special guest, Captain Mike Neal. Mike is all the way from Maine. and he's lived down here for 20, 30 years. I've been out with him a couple times. He took us on a great tour of Asaba when Dottie West was still living out there. And he has 2 boats. One is rather personal. It's 12 to 15 capacity passengers. The other one holds over 40. It has a head in it, and it's the one he likes to take out on excursions. And he was just out on one today, or Vic was just out on one today, but he offers a variety of excursions. He'd be glad to discuss those with you. And if you have your grandkids down here or visitors, whatever, it's a great adventure to go out and, hey, what do you want to do? What do you want to see? Mike has also worked with the local movie producers in the area here. He's had a few adventures with them that he's going to share with us tonight. So let me introduce Captain Mike Neal. Stand on it.
Oh, yeah. Sitting on the table. Yep. Do we have a volume? Is that can everyone hear me? No? We can't hear. Okay. All right, so is that a little bit better? Yeah, I'm getting the thumbs up. All right. Yes, my name is Mike Neal, and I have been a local captain here for a little over, I guess, 30 years. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about where I came from, and then we're going to kind of weave that into where I am today. I'm originally from Maine, and I grew up there. And then I decided that wasn't quite the place I wanted to be at 18 years old. I joined the Army, went and saw a little bit of the world, saw a few things, and got a few skills. I left that service, but then became a foreign military advisor. So I taught the Tunisian Air Force, the Turkish Air Force, the Saudi Army, and saw a little bit about the world, saw some places that were probably not so good at the time, Gulf Wars breaking out and things like that. So I decided to get back to my first loves, and that was the water. So I thought I was doing the smart thing. I became a dive instructor. So I actually worked on cruise lines and played in that pretty blue water down in the Caribbean. But I realized that there was a little bit more to life than probably just being a dive instructor. So I went back to school. I went to Maine Maritime Academy. So there I got a degree, and sometimes I like to refer to it as the basket weaving of degrees, but it was a small business degree in marina management and small vessel operations. And so I learned the business of being out on the water. I came to Savannah as a student intern. I fell in love with the area. I hadn't lived any place for more than a year for 13 years until I came to Savannah. And now I've been here 30 years. So it kind of grows on you, as a lot of you may have that same type of feeling. But, you know, one of the things that, and so let me go on, I guess, on with this part of the history, was that I came down, I managed a marina for a number of years. And then we sold that marina, and I started another business called Bull River Cruises. And that's where many of you may have seen me or know about. We've done a number of the trips, both to Ospa Island and sunset trips and things like that. But, you know, that was just, again, part of it. I also started a company called Moon River Kayak Tours. I had the opportunity, and many of you will appreciate this, is I had the opportunity to go to Costa Rica to go fishing. I went fishing for 3 months on a reality TV show. It was called The Catch Costa Rica. It was 6 men and 6 women in competition fishing. So the couple of lessons that I learned, and many of you have probably learned these over the years also, is that sometimes fish don't bite, no matter how hard, and you think that, you know, you can't blame the guide on that day because the fish just aren't biting. And after spending 3 months, we came to that realization. There's other days that they bite, but they don't basically really, they just kind of nibble. And it's hard to catch them on those days. And then there's the days that they eat. And those are the days that you go, oh yeah, I mean, what a great day we had. Those fish are just taking that bait, and there's just nothing that you can do but hook them. But that was a great lesson for me, because I'd been a fisherman, and And I'd never, I always thought, oh, either the guide wasn't good that day, or, something wasn't happening, I wasn't doing something right. But you start realizing there's more to it than just, the skills and things like that. The fish have a big part of getting out there and enjoying that day. So that was also the introduction for me to the film industry. Spending 3 months with cameras on us and being mic'd and figuring out how everything kind of works. That was a big introduction. So when I came back to Savannah, I took a break because it was a long time on camera. But then I got some opportunities to work for people like Ben Affleck in the movie The Town. And then the first time I was a department head on a film was actually a movie called Savannah. And it was based on a true story about Ward Allen, and who was a Savannah aristocrat, and his friendship with Christmas Moultrie, who was the last slave born in Mulberry Grove. Didn't make critical acclaim. Those that live in this area, many of us enjoyed the scenery and how that came about. But again, what that did is allowed me to view an industry that I had never really seen before. I took the advice of a first AD, a gentleman that's kind of working in the upper ups of the film, and he said, you have the capability and the background to be part of this industry. And he introduced me to a few gentlemen that are some of the biggest gentlemen in the world for what I do. And so the title, many times what I have on a film is called Marine Coordination. And a Marine coordinator is basically responsible for whatever is above, below, or around the water. So whether it be the boats that are used for support, the camera boats, the picture boats, the underwater videography, the water safety, and that's a big portion of it. So it's amazing when you walk onto a set, there'll be 150 people there, and everyone has a specific job, and they all have to work together. And the way they can work together is to have a knowledge of the whole process, but then also be able to allow people to do their portion of the job. So one of the, so some of the films that we've done recently, well, first of all, the film that we have probably the most honor of working on, and we call it a passion project, was a movie called Peanut Butter Falcon. Has anyone seen that film? A few people have. If you haven't seen it, highly recommend it. The Peanut Butter Falcon was a film, I'll give you the outline of it, was about a Down syndrome character who escapes out of a home and goes on a Huck Finn adventure. And the way that film was first developed is actually, and put forth, is almost better than the actual film itself, or more interesting. The producers, writers of the film, and then the directors of the film, all the same people, two guys, had never done anything like that before in their life. They had met Zach, the Down syndrome actor, in a camp, a summer camp, basically. And he said his dream was to be an actor in a major motion picture. And they said, Zach, we're sorry, but they don't write motion pictures for Down syndrome people. And he got a little upset about that. And he said, well, why don't you make the movie? And they looked at each other and they said, okay. And they were homeless for 2 years. They got a book from the library on screenwriting. They wrote that screenplay as being homeless for 2 years, living in a tent and living in a tree house. And they then wrote it. And then people said, sorry, who wants to see a movie about a Down syndrome character? And so they had to do a proof of concept where they made a little mini short film. They showed that around and they finally got some traction with that. And they actually had to send it through social media to actors and actresses to kind of garner that interest. They finally got through that process. When I first met them, it was 2 years before we filmed the movie here in Savannah. And they thought it was going to be maybe $150,000, $200,000 movie, 20 people involved in just this little kind of guerrilla type of filming. 2 years later, we had 120 people. It was at that time a $3 million film, ended up being a $6 million film. And they walked on set and they said, who are all these people? They had never seen a film set. This was the writers and then the directors of the film. And a lot of people, when we film, in a normal film, we don't care what is over there. All we're looking at is what's over here. And because the viewer will never see this, but they didn't have that type of background. So they said, no, we want to go to places that have a 360, a wild place, a place that is real. So we end up filming in Ebenezer Creek, in the swamp at night. We filmed out at Little Tybee. We had water coming up over our waist on sandbars, and we were evacuating people off boats. If you actually watch the film, there's a scene where you see a shark fin go in front of the camera, and it's out of focus because they're focusing on the characters, but you can actually see the little fin swimming by. We were, this was an incredible project to work on. And when I had first knew it was coming in, I told friends, I said, you have to be part of this film. They're like, what do you mean? I said, no, just trust me. This is one that you'll regret if you never do it. That film was the highest grossing indie film 3 years ago. And I don't believe there's one bad review out there. So again, if you haven't seen it, strongly recommend it. It was a film done out of love, especially the writers who then were, like I say, were the directors, were also the producers. And even after the filming, they were trying to put it out there, and they said, who wants to watch a film like that? And they ended up going and getting a partnership with the Down Syndrome Society, so that then they would help promote it. They made them producers in it so that they would get a piece of the pie, but they went out and promoted it. And like I say, it was the highest grossing indie film 3 years ago. And to me, it's just a wonderful case study of how to go from zero to making a successful film. The name of that film is called The Peanut Butter Falcon. It's on Hulu and on Amazon Prime, I believe, still. And I get a little bit of money from my SAG residuals. Click yes. So yeah, so I'm very lucky that I work for 2 different unions within the film industry. I'm a SAG stunt performer, and then I also work IATSE, which is the kind of working man's part of the what they call below the line part of filmmaking. So with that, that's how I literally get my health insurance. And so it's funny because unions sometimes get a bad rap, but in the film industry, if you didn't have a union, you wouldn't be able to accumulate your benefits. You wouldn't have the safety aspects that come in play. So before I was involved in film, I had worked in AT&T and a few other places that had unions, and I felt, who cares? Their time is gone. But after working in certain industries, you realize that there's still some industries that have a place for things like, for unions. Another film that many of you, has anyone seen, I'm trying to think some local films that we did that were kind of notable. One down by Priest Landing. We've done a couple down there. One of them, the one that kind of highlights Savannah in a very pretty way, would be Lady and a Tramp live action with Disney. If you have that Disney streaming project thing, or if you have kids coming, it's definitely worth watching. It really kind of highlights what Savannah might have been in 1912, especially if it had snow. There's a beautiful snow scene down by the cathedral. But we filmed, we had a paddle wheel boat right out there in the Skidaway River, and we actually made downtown Savannah at Priest Landing. We actually built a barge system that looked like a dock that came from that. The movie that it will be coming out this year that I'll highly recommend, even though I haven't seen it yet, but just the way they made it, is a movie called Devotion. And that is based on the Korean War and a story of two pilots based on a true story of an African-American pilot and a white pilot and their friendship. And the flying in that film is all real. We used 6 Corsairs and 6 Bearcats from World War II, still had the bullet holes in some of the aircraft. And we flew them for a month off the coast from Tybee, a lot of it down by Ossabaw Island, Ossabaw Sound. And it was just incredible, the aerial photography. We had a camera jet and a camera helicopter flying with them. And I think that you'll really enjoy, it's not CGI'd, it's the real thing. And you'll recognize probably some of the islands. And like I say, the Cockspur Lighthouse, we flew within 20 feet of that numbers of times. So these are some of the projects. And what happened is I was able to accumulate life experiences. One of the things that I find interesting is how we discover things throughout life. One of the things I discovered just 4 months ago, I guess, is that I was diagnosed as ADHD. And it's funny, back when we were growing up, there was not such a thing. So it was just kind of that person that couldn't stick with anything, or the one that kind of went off and did the odd things, the messy person. And but some of us who lived through that time and were able to bring success, use some of those things to our advantage. I'm interested in so many things. I try to educate myself on the history of an area, the science of an area, and just that accumulation of skills has now allowed me to move into this career in the television and movie industry. One of the things that we have here in this area is such a rich history of nature, history, and the combination and how those two things come together. You folks here are part of a great organization. You should be very proud of what the organization does, and you should look at the ways that this organization gives back to the community, the Fishing for Children. I mean, it's amazing that the amount of change you can make sometimes with something very simple. You never know what's going to flip the switch. I was working with a nonprofit. I worked with a number of them, but one of the nonprofits I was working with was Wilderness Southeast, and we were doing a program called Fish Gotta Swim. We were taking school kids. They had a very robust program. My portion of it was taking school children from downtown Savannah, bringing them up through the port into the Savannah Wildlife Refuge. We do salinity testing along the way. We would educate on the importance of the waters and the industries. But one of the things was just the exposure of those children to the outdoors and the environment that they were traveling through. We brought one set of kids, well, we brought them all, but basically we did this trip. 5 years later, I took the same school group out, or the same teacher out, and she said, I want to let you know that we actually have some feedback from some of the kids that you had taken out previously. They have, one of them is in the Naval Academy, one of them is working on tugboats, one of them is working in another piece in the maritime industry. They all wrote back to her and said it was due to one field trip that they saw people working on ships, tugboats. They saw, and we were explaining to them, you can do this. This is, people's worlds sometimes become so narrow. They believe what they grew up with within that 3-mile area is what is their future. If we can somehow take those children and show them there's more to that 3-mile area, and because most of us grew up in 3-mile areas that may have been privileged in effect, but they don't have that opportunity. So if we can show them that there are other aspects of life, and sometimes that's taking someone fishing, it's taking them for a field trip, it's exposing them to these other areas. That is how we make change, and especially, and the old story of a little girl being down by the beach, and there's thousands of starfish on the beach, and she, it starts throwing them back into the river, into the ocean, and a gentleman comes up to her and says, "What are you doing?" She says, "I'm throwing the starfish back in the ocean." And he says, "Well, there's thousands of them. You can't make a difference." She picked one up, looked at it, threw it back in, and said, "I made a difference to that one." And that's what I think we have to look at sometimes. We get overwhelmed with our inability to make large change, but sometimes we need to look at making small change. And this organization, with things like the Fishing for Kids, is part of that. So, there's an old saying: you should give time, talent, or treasure, and whatever one that you can, or all three you can give to any of the nonprofit organizations, but especially the one that you're now associated with in this room, I think is something that I try to do. I've always lived my life, and I believe it just makes life so much more pleasant when we do that. It just gives us that, the gratitude. And I don't give because I want something out of it. It's a selfish thing. It makes me feel good. It's kind of a funny thing by giving. You can tell my ADD is in full range tonight. I skip around a lot. So I guess, a couple things I did want to talk about or make sure was the, first of all, some of the science that's involved in CCA. You've done some oyster reef ecology and restorations. And one of the things that I think may come out to play, I did a study a number of years ago, and I think it's starting to gain traction, was locally, one of the interesting things when we looked at oyster reefs, we towed a sense of sensors along, and wherever the oyster reef was large, we had high marks of radon. And it's kind of like what does that mean? Well, the radon was an indicator that we had an upwelling of fresh water in that area. There was a crack in the aquifer right there, and there was an upflowing. So, and that's where the most healthy oyster reefs were. So back in the 50s and 60s, when the oysters took a dive around this area, they didn't do very well. Everyone said it was pollution and overfishing. Part of it may also have been the drawdown of the aquifer from the new industries of paper mills and such like that. So, we think we know things, but then we have to keep on being open to new knowledge, because, and to me, that wherever we went, like I say, we would get these high things of radon. We'd put a tube into the mud, fresh cold water would come up right into those clear tubes that we had. So, it's an interesting, so we have to kind of maybe check out where we're putting some of those oyster restoration projects. And I know there's a lot of research going out right now of how the different structures they're using. I saw a number of them out there on the Skidaway River, how they're looking at different materials to use as bases. So let's hope, because we need that new research. We need to keep on looking. Let's see if I've left anything major off here. So I guess one of the things is we want to kind of see what would you like to know more about, I guess, from me. I've explored this area. I've worked with numbers of nonprofits. Like I say, I have worked with many universities. We have Ospa Island very close to us, which has a lot of changes happening. I'm not sure if you know that, but with Eleanor Torrey West dying 2 years ago, I guess it is now. She was 107 years old, the matriarch of the island. Her home has now reverted back to the state, as because she had that life estate, and now that home is fallen under the Ospa Island Foundation's purview, because they are there to oversee some of the buildings and things like that. So there, if you do go back out for as a group through CCA or through other places, many times that's now being added on to as part of the ability to go and look and see what that, how that mansion is. 20,000 square feet, beautiful mansion built in the 1920s. For those that don't know, sometimes I mistakenly think everyone knows everything there is about here, but obviously 30 years I've gained a little bit, and it's kind of hard to assume everyone knows everything about it. Some other trips that I've done, just so that in case you once you're just kind of throwing out so that you can have ideas, up to Augusta and back. I've done that trip. So if anyone says, wow, I'd love to explore the Savannah River, or I would like to know a little bit more about that, just ask me. I've done that 3 or 4 times, at least 200-mile river trip. So, so it was interesting. My first time I went up the Savannah River, I knew so little that it's scary. Again, it's one of those things that you don't realize how wrong you're doing something until after a number of times you've done it, or years. I think a lot of us experience that in life. You know, we start out thinking we know it all, and then we realize after a number of years, whatever we're doing, we go, oh, wow, I didn't know very much when I first started out. But so the first trip I did, I was invited up by the Savannah River Keeper to bring guests. And I went up the Savannah River with 2 of us in my 45-foot pontoon boat. But I picked they picked a kind of a tough time. It was flooding. So the Savannah River normally has 7.6 billion gallons of fresh water coming down each day. It had 26 billion gallons of fresh water coming down during that time period. We put the boat in, we drove the boat, instead of at boat ramps, into the parking lot of boat ramps. The river was 14 feet higher than normal in some places. So again, we didn't have to worry about sandbars, but we did have to worry. I lost count after over 200 logs going by. And so we went up to the Savannah River. We made it to Augusta. The lock and dam, which normally has about a 14 to 17 foot drop, had 0. They just opened up the locks and we drove straight through. And we picked up our folks, and then we brought them down. We camped along the banks of the river. It was a 4-day trip. Our last night we stayed at Ebenezer, which if you haven't ever been to Ebenezer, again, I'll tell a little bit about that in a moment. But so then we did that trip, and then we went through times of drought. So we've got to see the Savannah River in many different ways, but there is no fuel along the way. So you have to either pre-plan or carry it with you. There are some places like at 301 Bridge that if you have people meet you there, that's not a bad place. I would advise, if you had a trailable boat and you want to do the trip, is to trailer up to Augusta and then come down, because then you're coming down with the flow of the river and your fuel economy is much better than going against the river, going upwards. Unfortunately, the lock and dam no longer operates. So you have to put in right down below the lock and dam at where the airport is in Augusta. It was nice going through the lock, but unfortunately that's come into disrepair and now is in the middle of a very large legal kind of conundrum, because it's tied in with Harvard deepening, which they have just finished, but they can't sign off on it until they do something about that project up there, that lock and dam. They want to build a rock where then some people want to put in like a whitewater course, but other people say, no, we want the lock and dam back. And the feds are saying, no, we're not going to build you another, we don't need to lock and dam anymore. So if you want to research a very interesting little thing that's happening, that's up there in Augusta. Augusta, if they let it just flow through, and they had no lock and dam at all, they'd have a very small little, they would no longer be a lake downtown Augusta, it'd just be a little stream going down the middle of it, which obviously the businesses and the people that own property on the side don't want that to happen. So I did mention Ebenezer. Again, another place that if you have never explored, you can do it multiple of ways. There's a couple outfitters, trying to think, Backwater Expeditions and Savannah Canoe and Kayak, that do kayaking and canoeing up there. It's a Blackwater Creek, and it is one of 4 wild scenic rivers in Georgia. It has trees that are over 1,000 years old. If you did see the movie Peanut Butter Falcon, where we did the baptism scene and the raft at night with the campfire on it, that was all done in Ebenezer. It's one of the most beautiful places and has such rich history. That's where Sherman's army was coming down, and they built a pontoon bridge across, and then it's called the tragedy because the Union forces brought all the equipment and over across the river and left behind the camp followers and the people they had freed along the way because they were slowing them down, and cut the bridge and left them there. And some of them panicked because Wheeler's cavalry was actually coming behind. The military had said it was on the other side, but they basically got them from behind, and they panicked, went into the river and drowned. They say up to 1,000 people drowned in that massacre. That's actually what then prompted, so we're going now history, field order number 13, is it? The 40 acres and a mule, where they gave the freedmen the islands of coastal Georgia, which only lasted about 6 months. And then the people that owned those previously got them back because they had the money, and they said, okay, you can have your island back, which is our Skidaway Island, our Oswald Island, our all those islands. They got them back because they said, if you say you didn't believe in the Confederacy, you can have your property back. And all the owners said, yeah, those guys were horrible, those Confederates. We didn't believe in those people, so they got their islands back, which then, for example, the islands of Ospa Island then reverted into basically a tenant farming sharecropping type of situation. We had a hurricane in 1897 that basically made farming very hard, and those people knew that that lived on the island, the only way they could have freedom was to own land. So they actually settled in Pinpoint, right across the bridge here, and they found someone that would sell them land. And then they developed their community based on oystering and crabbing, and the factory now houses the Pinpoint Heritage Museum, which, if you haven't been there, again, very close, very good. Eventually, they'll do it right. It was interesting with that museum was it was developed by Harlan Crow, a billionaire who was friends with Clarence Thomas, but a billionaire thinking he knew better than anyone else, built this beautiful facility, but built a snapshot of a culture, but not a way of continuing the culture. So eventually, if that culture is to continue, then they'll have to do something like a food aspect where they'll then have people coming back time after time, and they can keep that culture alive using foodways and customs. And basically, because you have to be able to make a profit to continue on. If not, then you go off and do something else. Again, a tangent. We just took them way over here. So so as you can see, my interest in different things very, very much. I'm very much friends with many people over in Pinpoint. I've been working with Ospa Island for 20 years. Like I say, some of the nonprofits. Here's another one. We talk about, sorry, the giving back to the community. I've been involved in the Tybee Island Marine Science Center, and recently we built a new center out there. And it's, well, not 100%. I will say it's 80% done because, of course, exhibits during the time of COVID and things like that. But if you go out to Tybee Island, you go to the north end, I strongly encourage you to go there, even if you literally walk in, go upstairs to, there's a little lounge basically overlooking the ocean. It's gorgeous. Just beautiful seats, cushion couches to sit and read. But even if you ignore all the marine science aspect of it and just go there for that, again, it's a way that the exposure you have to nature and can touch people in different ways. One thing I've learned, I've taught thousands and thousands of children, is when I first started out, I was very much, this is what, I have something I need to tell you, and you have to get this information, and I'm angry if you don't. Well, after thousands of kids getting older, and now I realize sometimes just having them on a boat, having them look over the side, sometimes even having a nap. You know, I used to be mad if someone slept on the boat. Now I'm like, great, that might be the best sleep you get for the day. That might be very important to you. You know, and that can be as important as whatever lesson we want to try to impose. So we have to look at, you know, that there's, you know, there's a huge science behind water, and being CCA is very appropriate, is that your brain becomes very settled, and you can increase the happiness quotient in your life by literally just watching water. And whether that be the lagoon or going down to one of the marinas, or water has a profound effect on our brains. So if you are having a tough day or something, go down to, you know, Delagal, or go down to Landings Harbor, watch that water, because it really kind of resets us into a new place. Have any other questions? Like I said, I've touched on a lot of different things, and so yes. Yeah. Sure. So yeah. So Ospa Island. How do I get to Ospa Island? That's a great question. And so there's different ways. First of all, Ospa Island is not a place for tourism. You know, it was actually given to the state, sold to the state, with some caveats. It can only be used for scientific, cultural, educational purposes. Paraphrasing, okay, not great. But that's basically, so you say, oh, I can't go over there and have a party. I can't, but what you can do, there's several different ways. You can go over the foundation itself, if you go to Ospa Island Foundation.org, or, but if you look up Ospa Island Foundation online, they have public trips. They just had a Descendants Day trip last week. They'll have, they have trips, creative day, so you can go over with your phone, take pictures. That's, you know, and there'll be someone actually to help you if you've ever wanted to get a better picture with your phone, how to do that. There is sea turtle days that you can go over and look at the nesting. You can actually spend the night on Ospa Island. They have a couple different ways of different type of accommodations, but it pretty much all has to go through the foundation at one way or the other. Now, let's say you say, I have my CCA group, or I have my garden group, or I have my book club, and we'd like to kind of go over. We just had one of the local churches, I'm trying to remember which one, but one, not this one, but one of the local churches that here on Skidaway, they went over recently because they had a senior group that wanted to go over. As long as it's coached, that when they get there, they'll learn the history of the island, and they have on the island, the foundation will have an interpreter to basically give a little background of the thing. If you say, I want to know more, I have a garden club, I'd like to know about the vegetation or what historically was raised here. I want to know about indigo. They have indigo dyeing workshops over there. So those are so they have a mixture of private book groups and then open more public groups. So you can go in many different ways. It's not a private island. It is owned by the state, and then parts of it are managed by the foundation. If you're a hunter, you can go over and hunt. There's a number of hunts as there is on Wausau Island. So yeah, but it's a very interesting place. It is a place of many different faces. So if you go one time, you haven't seen Ossabaw Island. I've been hundreds of times and I haven't seen, even in one area, I've been hundreds of times. Every time I go, there's a different voice and a different face of Ossabaw that I hear. And sometimes it just takes a moment to sit, and they give you the opportunity to have that brought to you, or you absorb by yourself. Any other questions? Yeah, like I say, I do apologize a little bit for not having a great slide. I could have, unfortunately, I'm very busy. I have a project right now I'm working on called Panhandle, the Sony Hulu series that we're filming. And then I just did Color, the Purple, Color Purple. They're doing a film, Color Purple, musical, and I was working on that. And now I'm also working on Fear the Walking Dead is moving into Savannah. They can have the zombies around Savannah soon. The zombies will be here until March, starting in June, all the way through March. We're gonna have zombies around Savannah. I find out in 2 days where, but yeah, most likely out in Richmond Hill. You know, not too many out here on Skidaway. Yeah, and I'll always be back at that table back there. So if anyone has any individual questions, sometimes it's a more focused question that you don't want to to bring to the whole room. I'll be back there afterwards. So if anyone wants to stop by and give a chat, I'd be happy to do that. Thank you.
We are planning on a couple of excursions this year, and one of them will probably be with Mike, and we'll get that out to the membership. There's a lot of things we do at CCC. Our license plate up there. We've over $740,000 we've raised so far, and for this is for off-island projects. And now this is our calendar for the balance of the quarter. We have the kids fishing derbies coming up, as Tom mentioned. We're going to be talking to we have the Castaway Club. Susie Busco is going to start on June 25th. We're going to have 4 Castaway clubs this year. They'll all be on Saturday morning, and it's an educational series for the kids living on the island. It'll involve snakes, birds, whatever's, but it's to teach the kids about what all lives here with us. One a month, starting in June. And Susie's putting the calendar of events together right now, but we do have the dates. The dates are set, and we could use a few volunteers for that. Let's see, this is okay. One and the same. Okay, good. Well, now and then our speaker next month is going to be Dr. Rachel Guy from DNR, Wildlife Resource Division. She's going to be speaking on the critical importance of the saltwater estuaries. We do a lot of lagoon work here on the island, the freshwater lagoons and the brackish lagoons. And we're starting to look at expanding our impact on the brackish lagoons and the estuaries. And we're going to start exploring possibly working with the redfish and see what we can do to improve their environment and have more redfish in the area for us to catch. Now we're going to have a drawing. Now the drawing, last month's drawing was for Captain Mike Neal. So this month's is for Captain Stan Allen. This is a traditional charter for 2. Value of the prize is $440. And if you've not bought a ticket, there's still a little bit of time left. But Stan, why don't you come on up here with the tickets? Okay. If not, we would ask someone, Captain Mike, you want to come back up, please? We need an honest person there. You've established a good trust level. Yeah, Vic won last month. This is one winner. We had 2 winners for a while, and that became a disaster. One winner. Yeah, you want to... We got a wiener? Okay, look again. Okay, look at your ticket. We want a winner. Oh, we got a winner. Okay. I know you never win anything, do you? I would say 753, 569, 753. Is that right? 569, 753. You're a winner. Great. We want to be sure we get your name. Okay, after. Okay, good. And there's a microphone. So thank you for your participation tonight. We look forward to seeing you next month with the speaker we're going to have here from the Department of Natural Resources. And we hope to see you at the Kids Fishing Derby on May 28th. Once again, thanks for coming tonight. Well, Tim, I looked at you in the front row.